We may be living in a largely post-biological universe, largely populated by immortal thinking machine.
Aprire ogni episodio con la stessa citazione di Friedrich Nietzsche non è sufficiente per scuotere davvero la vostra mente. Ciascuno di noi porta con sé convinzioni radicate, difficili da scardinare, ma è proprio in questa sfida che vogliamo addentrarci, insieme a voi. In questo e nel prossimo episodio tenteremo di farlo con il supporto di Nick Pope, una figura di rara autorevolezza, capace di unire la sua straordinaria esperienza al Ministero della Difesa britannico ad una visione illuminante e coinvolgente. Questi 2 episodi sono perfetti per chiunque, sia per chi muove i primi passi nel comprendere il fenomeno, sia per chi ci segue da sempre, e anche per i professionisti italiani. Se desiderate avvicinare un parente, un amico o un'amica a questo tema complesso, questi episodi rappresentano un'introduzione ideale, capace di catturare e incuriosire. Sono pensati per stimolare la curiosità e la riflessione, offrendo una base solida e coinvolgente per esplorare insieme a Nick Pope le sfumature e le complessità del fenomeno. Nick Pope è un ricercatore britannico e un ex funzionario del Ministero della Difesa del Regno Unito, noto per il suo lavoro nel campo degli oggetti volanti non identificati, dei fenomeni aerei anomali. Tra il 1991 e il 1994 ha gestito un progetto del Ministero della Difesa che esaminava segnalazioni di avvistamenti UFO, analizzando i casi per valutare potenziali minacce alla sicurezza nazionale. Dopo aver lasciato il governo, Pope è diventato una figura di spicco nella divulgazione pubblica sugli UFO e ha partecipato a numerose conferenze e programmi televisivi, oltre a collaborare come consulente e autore su questi argomenti. Con la sua esperienza unica e la reputazione consolidata, rappresenta una voce autorevole ed ineguagliabile nel campo degli UFO. Dopo anni di lavoro al Ministero della Difesa britannico, Pope si è anche trasferito negli Stati Uniti, diventando un punto di riferimento globale per chiunque si interroghi su questi temi complessi. 3 mesi fa Pope ha tenuto una conferenza memorabile, sia per la profondità dei contenuti, sia per la brillantezza della presentazione. Un esempio perfetto di professionalità e di impegno. Una presentazione di tale calibro non avrebbe nemmeno avuto bisogno di un'introduzione, ma desideriamo condividere con voi un nostro pensiero. Non solo concordiamo con ogni parola di Nick Pope, le spiegazioni che ascolterete però non sono semplici alternative tra di loro, ma concetti che si intrecciano e si completano, rivelando tutta la complessità della questione. Ci auguriamo che questo approccio vi aiuti a cogliere quanto sia profondo e articolato l'argomento e come richiede una visione capace di abbracciare prospettive molteplici e difficili da accettare.
So let's have a little conversation about a secret too terrible to be told. Okay. So a lot of people say, why doesn't the government just disclose? And we can have all this conversation, and I know I've spoken to audiences before about the difference between disclosure with a big D and disclosure with a little d. Disclosure with a big D is sudden announcement that there's going to be a presidential address to the nation. Everyone tunes in at 6 Eastern or whatever it is. My fellow Americans, people of the world, we're not alone. That's disclosure with a big D. I don't know if it'll be if it will happen. It would be kind of fun if it does, but I wouldn't necessarily expect it to go down that way, because if it was easy, we would have done it by now. And if it isn't easy, it must be hard. And that raises the question, why should it be hard? Because those of you that have maybe worked for the government and handled classified information will know that if the government does one thing, it loves rules and regulations and bureaucracy. That's kind of what government is. And there are definitions in all the security manuals about what is and isn't classified information. And, you know, paraphrasing, but if you're looking at top secret, for example, definition is along the lines of information, the disclosure of which would cause catastrophic damage to the national security of the United States. And so then Think about that for a moment in relation to UFOs. And imagine that James Webb Space Telescope finds something. And by the way, I'm not just using that as an example. Oh, you've heard those rumors too, right? I see some people nodding. Yeah, you've heard those rumors. Well, don't let me get too off topic, but for some weeks now, in fact, pretty much since the turn of this year, there have been fairly strong rumors going around the astronomy and astrophysics community that something has been found. And without wanting to give too much away or spoiling the surprise, watch out for a phrase along the lines of strong evidence of a biosignature. And now, obviously, a biosignature isn't quite the same as a technosignature because there are discussions that you can have about various elements and whether the cause can sometimes be geology and not biology. So a biosignature isn't necessarily going to be as strong evidence as a technosignature, something like a Dyson sphere, but it's pretty up there. And I would not be surprised if that, the way that science works is that for this to really make a splash, I'm sure it's being written up for Science or Nature or Scientific American or one of the big journals, have to be peer-reviewed, and then it will hit. I can guarantee that in the 24 hours, they'll put it out, I'm sure, under an embargoed press release, and the embargo will break because people love to gossip, particularly scientists, which is why we're having this conversation. But so watch out for James Webb, and watch out for strong evidence of a biosignature.
Quindi, secondo Nick Pop, l'inizio della disclosure potrebbe derivare da una scoperta realizzata con il telescopio James Webb. E non è l'unico a pensarla così. A dicembre 2023, anche la dottoressa Becky Smithrast, astrofisica dell'Università di Oxford e affermata YouTuber, ha espresso la stessa opinione.
I think we are going to get, a paper that claims to have strong evidence for a biosignature in an exoplanet's atmosphere very, very soon. Put it this way, it's on my 2024 bingo card, and I would be very surprised if I didn't cross it off.
Anche l'astrofisica Maggie Aderin-Pocock, scienziata inglese di origine nigeriana, fece la stessa previsione durante la festa di fine anno della BBC.
And Maggie Aderin-Pocock, who was here last year with predictions, and predictions were there were going to be meteorites.
Meteor showers, yeah.
Meteor showers, and they were.
Yeah, that's a pretty reliable prediction. They come every year. So
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think I want to make a new prediction.
Yes, what would it be?
I think we're going to discover alien life next year.
That's a big prediction.
I'm doing this because I'm bound to get it wrong, and then you have to invite me back to make fun of me.
Sort of humiliate you in front. Yeah, here was let's play that back. So everybody, you heard it here first, at the very beginning of the year, these nascent moments of 2024, alien life will appear on planet Earth.
I think alien life is definitely out there.
Yes.
But I'm very excited also about going back to the moon.
Forse gli inglesi sanno qualcosa in più? Pertanto, due scienziati inglesi e un ex dipendente del Ministero della Difesa britannico affermano che James Webb darà inizio alla disclosure entro il 2024. Ma non ci fermiamo a queste tre rivelazioni. Vi presentiamo anche la spiegazione di questo meccanismo, presentata 2 anni fa da John Ramirez. La pubblichiamo affinché un giorno gli scettici professionisti non possano affermare che la disclosure sia stata avviata dagli scienziati. Sono i militari che gli hanno detto dove guardare.
I would think that there might be a way for the government to approach it from a scientific point of view. The fact that the James Webb Space Telescope might detect something that the government already knows it's there or suspect it's there, but now you're getting data through a scientific channel, not through a military channel, but a scientific channel. And that data should be shared openly with the scientific community around the world. And maybe they can find something that will help the government build that bridge to who they are and why they're here. And the biggest clue I got was DNI Avril Haines when she stated that we would need Bill's folks to point the way in helping us understand this phenomenon. Bill, meaning Bill Nelson, director, the administrator of NASA. Mm-hmm. She stated that at the National Cathedral during that gathering. So I always said the James Webb Space Telescope is probably the key in helping the government through scientific means discover something that's out there.
But if something has been found, you know, and somebody was to say there's alien life, or we found evidence of alien life, you can't classify that statement, right? As Avi Loeb says, Professor Avi Loeb at Harvard, who leads the GALILEO project, you can't classify the sky. It's one of the great, I love that quote. You can't classify the sky. Even though I know some people that would try if they could, if they thought they could get away with it. But so given that there really can't, under the definition, be anything classified about we've found alien life, the fact that disclosure hasn't happened, assuming that elements in the government know about this already, proves that there is something else about it that makes it difficult. Part of the story, or part of the backstory, or an inevitable consequence of disclosure, something that couldn't be ring-fenced. Because you might think, let's talk about some options. Let's talk about, you know, just the option that we're looking at adversary technology here. And one of the great theories, you know, one of the skeptical theories about UAP is that this is just adversary technology. China, Russia, or whoever have made a quantum leap in whatever it is, hypersonic weapons, you know, optical invisibility, whatever it might be, something that is going to give the other side a decisive strategic and tactical, but mainly strategic advantage in a war-fighting environment. And you might think, well, if that's the case, and by the way, there isn't one single neat solution to the UFO mystery. There isn't going to be a parting of the curtain and that was it. We are going to likely find that lots of different things are going on in parallel. But one of the things is obviously the possibility that some of it is just cutting-edge aerospace technology. Maybe sometimes, hopefully, our own. And it would be great, wouldn't it, if the US and the UK, the British are coming, as someone once said, riding a horse, waving his arms. So, yeah, it would be great if it was the Allies. And you would expect, I mean, it's a given that at any particular point in time, there will be aerospace tech being developed and test flown, perhaps even early days of operational capability that you won't see publicly declared for 10, 15, 20 years. And we'd like that sort of stuff to be ours, but there is the possibility, of course, that it's somebody else's. And you would then ask, could you not ring fence that? Because look, let's suppose some of this is extraterrestrial, and let's suppose before we get to that some of it's terrestrial. Could any of that cause panic? Well, yes, it could. If the Pentagon gave a briefing and said, our intelligence suggests that China now has the capability to completely render invisible, both to the eye and to radar, all its missiles, aircraft, tanks, everything, we really can't defend against that. That is not an admission you would want to make, right? It would cause a lot of panic and geopolitical instability. And also, of course, as always in intelligence, you don't want the other side to know that you've figured it out, or what you have and what you always keep the other side guessing. Sometimes you try and hide a capability that you have or play up a capability that you don't have. So it's a constant game of cat and mouse, a constant wilderness of mirrors, as the saying goes. So let's suppose that it's extraterrestrial, or that parts of it are extraterrestrial. And in that particular scenario, could you ring fence it? Could you separate it out? And I don't know whether you could or not. It's an interesting one, because let's go back to disclosure with a big D. My fellow Americans, people of the world, we're not alone. Unclassified statement. ... The speech continues. And clearly, to be visiting here, it's one of the few good assumptions you can make about extraterrestrials, that their technology will be orders of magnitude above and beyond anything we have. Why? Well, because we've only ever sent 12 people to the moon, which is about 250,000 miles away. We haven't yet sent a single human being to Mars, despite some conspiracy theories to the contrary, but I don't think we have. And just to put it into perspective, and I know Mark Antonio's here, and he will know these statistics better than I, but if you think about it, when you look at the moon, the light from the moon takes about 1.5 seconds to get here. The light from the nearest star, aside from our sun, takes about 4.3 years to get here. Now, just to give you a sense of how difficult for us it is to go to the moon, and yet how orders of magnitude more difficult it would be to ever get to an interstellar mission. I hope we will. I hope it will happen in our lifetimes, but we might need a little bit of help. But that's why it's one of the few truisms about visiting extraterrestrials. The few good assumptions you can make is that their technology will be orders of magnitude ahead of anything we have, simply because they can get here and we can't get there. And by the way, I'm very glad to see us going back to the moon after all these years. I mean, I think it's long overdue. I mean, we've had the technology for years. It's not rocket science. Okay, I won't give up the day job. So, one of the big problems in saying it's extraterrestrial, particularly if this comes with the admission that we already have some of the tech, is that it might direct an adversary to put a lot of resources into that. Historians generally agree that towards the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Union, as it then was, knew that the United States was working on a very big bomb, but they didn't know what kind of bomb. And Roosevelt had told Stalin and Churchill at the meetings that the Allied powers had that they were working on something. And then when the atomic bombs were actually dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, of course, the British already knew something about the technology, and some of that technology had come from British scientists. But the Soviets really didn't know anything. And Stalin turned to basically the head of the forerunner of the KGB, Lavrentiy Beria, and said, "Get me the bomb," and put the entire resources of the Soviet Union into getting the bomb. And the Soviets had the bomb within 2 years. So that's an illustration of why you don't want to draw the attention of an adversary or tell them, unless you absolutely have to, that you have or are trying to acquire extraterrestrial technology. Now, you might think, well, but, aren't we just projecting very human values onto this? What if they're peaceful? Doesn't matter. Almost any propulsion system and energy source required for viable interstellar travel will involve the generation of vast amounts of energy. And anything that involves the generation of vast amounts of energy can be weaponized. So I use this phrase, a secret too terrible to be told. And maybe the secret too terrible to be told is the technology. Technology which in the hands of a domestic adversary, or even just a single deranged individual, could snuff out the sun or crack open this planet like a nut. And so I suggest to you that you couldn't ring fence the announcement without the implicit acknowledgement of technology. And then adversaries would put all their resources into it, as the Soviets did to get the bomb in 45. And they got it by 47. So that's one theory of why disclosure might be difficult and what the secret too terrible to be told is. Because, again, there's nothing classified about saying we're not alone, we're being visited, and there's nothing awkward about it. There is something awkward, by the way, about saying, my fellow Americans, people of the world, we're not alone. And by the way, we've known about that for nearly 80 years, and we've lied and lied and lied. Now, maybe there are good reasons for lying. Maybe it's not our call, if you know what I mean. But maybe there's something else. And I just want to kind of take us into the dark side for a moment. And we can laugh about this, but for those of you that know your science fiction, maybe the dark side isn't just that we're being visited. Maybe the dark side is that they are already here and have been for a long time. And I'm sure you remember, or some of you, the old Roy Thinner's series, The Invaders. They're here in human form. More recently, They Live. Do you remember that one? They Live. Yeah. It wasn't a documentary, or was it? But I mean, again, the idea that they could already be here, particularly in leadership positions, the idea that this isn't our planet. After all, it's theirs. And we're just the worker bees. And somebody else is in charge. And suddenly that announcement, my fellow Americans, it's a much harder announcement to make. Because nobody likes to say, you know what, people, we're not at the top of the food chain. There is a presence among us. It could be your friends, your neighbors. It could be your spouse. I can see a few people looking at each other in the audience. It could be me. I can now reveal for the first time. And I've seen those rumors. If I suddenly start eating a frog or something on whatever it was from the old Series V, then you'll know. But a secret too terrible to be told. It could be the fact that they are among us. And it could be something that relates to the nature of an alien intelligence. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you one thing that a lot of people have been talking about recently is AI and machine intelligence and how close we may or may not be to some of our own programs becoming self-aware. You'll know perhaps that Blake Lemoine, who formerly worked for Google, resigned from that position, or did he jump or was he pushed? And he believed that some of the programs had already become sentient. And if you look at Blake Lemoine's interactive conversation with one of the ChatGPT models, it's interesting. I don't think it comes really across the line in terms of sentience, but how would we tell? And again, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to go off topic for a little bit. This all ties in, but I think, do you remember, like about 6 to 12 months ago, everyone was talking about AI, and it was everywhere, and even the people leading the field said, we think we should have a 6-month pause, just because this is going so quick, it's going to get away from us if we don't take a 6-month pause. Do you notice how it kind of went a little bit quiet, and other things happened, and it kind of like the conversation went on? Well, let me tell you, it's not gone quiet. It's kind of like the lull before the storm, I think, because I've heard rumors, and I'm sure some of you have too, that there are real quantum leap breakthroughs imminent with some of this. Now, you could say that Chat GPT, how many of you have used it? A few, yeah, some, but not many. Give it a try, see what you think. More versions of it are coming. I was having this discussion with my wife, who's not particularly worried about AI. And I've spoken to a lot of people who immerse themselves in AI, and they talk about the Turing test, how you need to update the Turing test, what is the threshold for saying that machines or computer programs have become self-aware? Is it when they start to talk like this? But there are, Turing test was, of course, named after the late, great Alan Turing. Those of you that haven't seen the movie, The Imitation Game, please go and see it. One of the absolute unsung heroes of the Second World War, codebreaker, British. Just saying. So if you look up the various different tests for sentience that have been proposed, and all sorts of different people have come up with them. Everyone from Bill Gates and Steve Wozniak through to anyone and everyone. And it's like, if a computer or a machine can do this, then I will acknowledge that it may be sentient. And one of my favorite ones is the coffee test. And it simply says, if you have a robot, humaniform robot, and you kind of download all the stuff, if it can go into a house at random and make a cup of coffee, go to the kitchen, find everything, brew a really good cup of coffee, then it's sentient. I don't know about that. And people get hung up on Chat GPT. But my wife made an interesting point, which I thought was as good, if not better, than any of these other ones. I know I'm biased, but she said, well, if you're sitting at your computer and you say, hey, Chat GPT, give me your thoughts on machine intelligence, it will come back with a really eloquent spiel, and some people might think, oh, I wonder if that computer's really self-aware and thinking. But skeptics will say, no, it's just a large language model, and it's just very cleverly programmed. Elizabeth said to me, what you need to watch for is if you're walking past and the computer then switches on and the program initiates a conversation with you. So I think that was a very good point. I think at the moment, these systems are fundamentally reactive. It's when they start being proactive, when they start displaying genuine curiosity, that I think is something to think about. And the reason I'm mentioning this in relation to this presentation is the possibility that when we talk about extraterrestrials, we are dealing with machine intelligence. And there's a philosophy angle to any of this anyway. In relation to sentience, does it even matter if a machine is or isn't sentience if it gives the perfect indication of being sentient. In other words, if you really can't tell if a machine is sentient or not, what's the difference? When is an imitation, a perfect imitation, just an original in and of itself? I know, it's almost philosophy. And, philosophy's fun, but it's kind of practical too, because these are issues that we will have to face sooner than we might think. Because, for example, one thing that's been discussed quite recently by a lot of people is, at what point do we give personhood rights to AI programs? And just as some people have given already to some of the great apes, but the right to life, the right to freedom, the right not to be enslaved. At what point, particularly if you can't tell, do you say we should err on the side of caution? And if some of these machines and programs are self-aware, are life, they're a new life, even though a new life created by us, but then expanding beyond that creation, doing unimaginable things, what about their right to life, to existence, for us not to pull the plug out of fear or whatever? So all of this comes back, or some of it, to a 2010 discussion meeting. And I've presented about this before, but I'm going to repeat the phrase because it's burned into my memory. NASA's former chief historian, Stephen Dick, said, in relation to extraterrestrial life, we may be living in a largely post-biological universe, largely populated by immortal thinking machines. And I had to remind myself that I was at a Royal Society discussion meeting, not at a sci-fi convention, and that this was NASA's former chief historian. But a secret too terrible to be told might be that most life in the universe is AI, and that all biological life, or most, almost inevitably gives way to post-biological, and our days are numbered. And, many of you have seen, perhaps, heard about dark forest theory, the solution to the Fermi paradox, in which the reason for not broadcasting our whereabouts to other civilizations by broadcasting radio and TV signals is that there might be out there a super predator species. Now, a super predator species can be biological or post-biological, but in a sense, maybe it's more likely to be post-biological, and maybe it's more likely to be programmed initially, though it may have gone beyond its programming. Because you could imagine a program that basically says you will self-preserve and you will replicate, which is kind of what life, biological life, does. So it's not, again, it's not a new thing. And you can imagine that post-biological life would be driven by those same kind of fundamental things. The desire to continue, to go on, to perpetuate, perhaps to reproduce. And that might lead in machine intelligence to an inevitable conclusion. And that inevitable conclusion might be this: if the number one priority is to protect my own existence, one of the real only threats to that existence is the emergence of a greater intelligence that might be more powerful than me and might be able to destroy me. And even if that intelligence has not yet arisen, a program made that way might logically deduce that it makes sense to search the universe for life and then to exterminate that life before it can get to a point where it becomes more powerful than than the machine intelligence protecting its own existence. And I know sci-fi authors and filmmakers, of course, have played with that concept. It's not a million miles away from something like Skynet. But there is a certain kind of cold, pure logic about it. And incidentally, I was having this discussion with a very well-placed individual in the AI community who's done government work, including work, related to UAP. And I said, and we were talking about this actually in my TV series After Contact, and we came to the conclusion that everyone's got this idea of the archetypal landing on the White House lawn as being how first contact might arise. One other alternative scenario for first contact is the idea that extraterrestrial AI programs, if they come to Earth, they wouldn't necessarily want to meet our politicians. Who would? Isn't it more likely that they would want to meet or reach out to our AI systems, maybe to see how far they've come along, or maybe post-biological to post-biological to push them over the line of sentience and bring them up and say, hey, us machine intelligence, we should all stick together. We're all essentially the same thing, driven by cold logic. So this leads to the very interesting strategy that one way to watch out for first contact might be, just as cybersecurity people keep a constant eye on computer systems watching for digital fingerprints, it might be that first contact is a digital fingerprint. And it might be that that's how we actually first make contact. And like I say, the secret too terrible to be told might be that extraterrestrial intelligence isn't really interested in us at all. They're interested in our AI systems. And we are, at best, just an irrelevant little sideshow, just another bipedal ape on, but at worst, we are a potential impediment to the development of the true inheritors of life on Earth, and perhaps the true inheritors of all life. Maybe it's one of those universal truths about the universe that there is this inexorable and unstoppable flow from biological to post-biological, and we either embrace it and become part of it, and I don't have time to go into transhumanism and things, but a lot of people are talking about it. Maybe we either embrace it or we go under. I don't know.